Psychic Goddess Erica, back continuing on with the Learn the Tarot series. Today we're working with card 13 in the Major Arcana. It is the Death card, and I'm looking forward to getting into this to kind of, debunk, I guess, or to kind of shatter some of those illusions and stereotypes of what this card is, thanks to movies and TV and things like that. But anyway, we just came off of card 12, which was the Hanged Man. Now we're on card 13 in the Major Arcana. And if you've been watching this series, and you know by now that I read more intuitively, so I'm not going to speak on all of the literal symbolism here, which there's a lot of it. And it is important, so I do recommend that you look into that just for your own knowledge, because it will help to add to your reading if you have that knowledge. But because I read more intuitively, and that's how I was trained in the beginning before I later began to learn about the background symbolism, and that's just still kind of how I flow when I channel. Like, the cards for me more so just act as like a trigger tool to then download information. And sometimes it's like something comes through and I may not always even continue with looking at the card when I'm channeling. It just kind of sparks something and the rest gets downloaded. But anyway, kind of going off topic. So for me, I read more intuitively is what I'm trying to say. But I do recommend that you look into other videos. I'm trying to get this to focus. Yeah, I do recommend that you do look into other videos that may break down some of the actual symbolism with the creation of this card. Now, this is the Melanated Classic Tarot. So it's basically the same as the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith deck, but with melanated people in it. So if you're interested in this deck. So jumping into how I read this card. First, let me just say, a lot of what you see in our movies and TV and things like that represent the death card as meaning literal death or gloom and doom or something bad happening, or it's a bad omen. It's not really that. Not typically. The majority of the time, the death card is more about symbolic death. Symbolic death, death that then leads to rebirth. The death of an old chapter, the death of an old cycle. Sorry, there we go. The death of an old chapter, the death of an old cycle, that then you move on in a new direction towards a new chapter, a new cycle. So it's more about death and rebirth or transformation. Think of like the transformation of like a butterfly. That's like one of my favorite. Oh no, a phoenix. Phoenix is even better. A phoenix dies and becomes ashes, and then is reborn and rejuvenated from those ashes, transformed, stronger, more powerful, more magical than before. It's kind of like that. Now, depending upon the situation, depending upon the dynamic, depending upon the other cards around it, or what you're just channeling and downloading in terms of your own psychic and intuition, you know, sometimes you may not always feel magical coming right out of it, but whatever needed to die off is something that needed to die off to close out symbolically. Sometimes this can also represent a death, a ego death, meaning like, let me try and get an example. So let's say you really wanted a certain relationship, right? Or you think you really wanted a certain relationship, you didn't want it to end, but it was your ego holding on to it, or it was your traumas holding on to it, or it was your wounds, or maybe your fears of starting over, whatever it is that were holding on to it. So then that relationship ended, it died, and now you're left starting over. Well, that is kind of an example of an ego death, because your ego was attached to something you thought you wanted, but ultimately Spirit Universe is trying to tell you that something better is coming once you let that close out. That's an example. Or maybe an old addiction or an old obsession or something that wasn't serving you is dying off. Or maybe you were maybe you've been hurt before and you've been closed off to people. Instead of working on your own wounds, you just shut people out, and then now you're realizing that that part of you needs to die off, it needs to change. That's an example as well as the ego death in my opinion. So that's coming through. Looking at the card, you know, this is, I think it's supposed to be like the Reaper, like the Grim Reaper, But I kind of like to think, or like an angel of death kind of figure. Sorry. There we go. More like an angel of death kind of figure, Grim Reaper, whatever you choose to see it as, you know, coming to kind of claim and release the old so that they can take you into this new chapter, into the beyond. The thing that's fascinating about the death card is that it doesn't end there though, because nothing dies, it just changes form. Energy just changes form. So that's why 13 is not the last of the cards. There's more that come after it because the story continues, because things will not stop at death, symbolically or literally. Now, and again, depending upon the cards around it and what you're channeling, how you're viewing this particular ending that leads to a rebirth, can sway on the more positive or negative side for you, at least in the initial stages, or for the client or the querent that you're reading on. It just really depends on the situation, because remember, there's never one meaning for a card. It's always going to change. This is why trusting your intuition to interpret is important. What I think is beautiful is in the background is that there's a sun rising. So it's almost like, even though something ended, life continues on. You know, there's still another day to come in some way, shape, or form, whatever energy you or someone else is transformed into. Just pointing out one of the symbolism here, the person that's lying here that has been, let me see, there we go, lying down here, that has transitioned on. That's also supposed to represent a ego death, or the death of an old chapter too. So that's kind of where it comes with that. And yeah, it sometimes may be overwhelming or difficult to deal with change, even if it's really great change. But this is kind of what the representation of this card is. Now, in terms of reversed, again, as I'm always saying, I don't put too much weight on reversals, but if it does come up reversed, sometimes for me, that means that maybe somebody's resisting the change. Maybe somebody's resisting the ending of something or the rebirth of something. Maybe someone, maybe it happened suddenly and you just weren't ready for it, you know, things like that. That, to me, when it's reversed, it can kind of represent that, but I can still get that same meaning even if it's upright. Again, it just depends upon the other cards and what's being channeled, even if I'm just reading off the one card alone and no other cards, things like that. It depends on the person, their energy that you're reading for, and their question, if any at all, etc. Let's see what else. Is it possible that this card could possibly represent someone transitioning to the great beyond? It's possible, but it's very rare. Very, very rare. I also find that this card can represent that there's a need to do grief work. It often comes up when there's still some grief taking place or grief work happening, or that needs to happen as well. So, and if it's reversed again, maybe you're resisting that grief. Maybe you're trying to push it away or sweep it under the rug, but it still needs to be dealt with. So this is what I see, this is what I have for you guys as far as the death card. Let me know, comment below your experiences with it, maybe things that I did not pick up or didn't speak on, but you've noticed about its representation in your life, or how you have a certain connection to it. Comment below. Share your feedback on this series in the comments below. Also, remember to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and if you choose to, you could always tip by buying me a coffee for being your teacher in this series. And I will talk to you guys another time. Bye.